Welcome everybody to another video, and today I will be watching through another video that puts forth various arguments in an attempt to disprove the widely adopted and accepted theory of evolution in the process of natural selection. The particular video that I will be looking at today is titled 6 Reasons Not to Believe in Evolution, Proof for God, and it is published by the YouTube channel World Video Bible School, WVBS. Before continuing any further, I have to tell you all that less than 4% of the people who watch my videos are subscribed. If you would like to help me out on my journey into the fields of science and education, then subscribing would be a great way to help. Thanks for watching, now on with the video. As is a common theme amongst many of the channels putting forth ideas that attempt to contradict widely accepted theories, they have controlled comment section and likes turned off. I believe that if the end goal is truly to educate people on what you believe to be the truth, you must absolutely allow people the chance to come to that conclusion through discourse. As I say in all of my other videos, I am far from a reliable source on the subjects of biology, anatomy, zoology, paleontology, evolution as a whole, or any other relevant scientific or academic fields that I touch on in this video. All of my information has come from my high school curriculum and other research from very reputable sources that I'll provide links to in the description. I am making this video to try and demonstrate that even somebody without fancy degrees and years of studying and work can make a solid case for evolution and natural selection. I am sure that there will be no lack of people more qualified than me who will watch this video, and if you are, please feel free to correct me or add input wherever you see fit. I will be pinning any comments with additional information. I will do my best to properly portray the arguments and segments of the video that I analyze, so as to not do an injustice to the original video. I will try to do a good job at keeping the video respectful to both the channel I am critiquing and anybody who might be watching with a different perspective. This video is not an attack on any religion, and people can hold any religious beliefs that do not hinder the progress of us as a species. With all of that being said, let's start the video.
In Cobb County, Georgia, there was a sticker that was placed on the inside cover of the biology textbooks. That sticker simply said that these textbooks contain information on evolution. Evolution is a theory, not a fact, about living organisms, and it should be looked at with an open mind, studied carefully, and critically considered. Do you know, if you were to take the sentiments of that sticker and you were to look at the evidences for evolution with an open mind, and you study them carefully and you critically consider them, what you would find is these evidences don't prove evolution at all. Here are 6 supposed evidences for evolution that simply are not good reasons to believe in evolution.
Alright, so we open up the video with one of the most common misconceptions that you will find among creationist arguments. The sticker provided in the book says, "Evolution is a theory, not a fact, regarding the origin of living things." Evolution, of course, is a theory backed up with substantial evidence, but the part of the quote that I disagree with is that very few scientists, if any, use evolution as a means of exploring the origin of life. This argument is so oftenly made because it can be made without actually addressing any of the relevant points made in favor of evolution. They create a straw man of a scientist that believe that evolution can explain abiogenesis so that they can take them down. Also, the use of theory as some sort of dirty word makes absolutely zero sense. In regular discourse throughout the day, the word theory usually means an informal guess as to why something is the way it is. In scientific fields, however, something being labeled as a theory is one of the most prestigious words that the observed phenomena can be titled. Saying something is just a theory is incredibly misleading because that implies that it being a theory is a negative thing, when in reality, and in the fields of science, something being a theory means it has substantial evidence backing it up.
Number 1, vestigial organs. In 1865, a German anatomist named Robert Wiedersheim said that he discovered 185 different useless or virtually useless organs in the body. And he said this was evidence of evolution. In fact, the argument goes that if humans evolved, then they would have had at one time organs that an animal would have used in a certain way, but would no longer be used in that way in the human body, and those organs would begin to atrophy and start to be useless. The problem with this vestigial organ idea is that there are 2 reasons it cannot prove evolution. Number 1, If you did have vestigial organs in your body, that wouldn't prove evolution. You see, evolution has to go from a single-celled organism to a human, and you don't need organs that are decaying and atrophying. You need evolution to produce new organs. We should find wings that are almost ready to allow organisms to fly that can't yet fly. We should find new visionary optical connections in living organisms that don't have them. We should see things adding information, not losing genetic information. And the second problem,
there are some glaring issues and misunderstandings of some of the fundamental aspects of evolution and natural selection that are presented in this segment. The way that he describes evolution by saying, you need to go from a single cell to a human being is very misleading. Evolution does not have some end goal in mind, and life forms don't try to get stronger or better or more intelligent. Random mutations occur from generation to generation, and if the change in the nucleotides elicits a mutation that positively benefits the organism in a way that allows it to have a higher chance to enter and reproduce, then the mutation will have a better chance of spreading throughout the population because the organisms with the mutated gene have a higher chance to live to the next generation. Over the course of millions and even billions of years and tens of thousands of generations, these small mutations add up until organisms that were once one species have created genotypes so different as to accommodate for their adaptations through natural selection that they can no longer reproduce and are then classified as a different species. Of course, evolution can add genetic information, but this guy trying to imply that you cannot remove it for it to be evolution is entirely false. And you quite literally said it yourself. You don't need organs that are atrophying. It makes perfect sense that organisms that have a mutation in their genotype that has them putting less energy towards atrophying organs will conserve more energy and have a higher chance of survival and reproduction.
The problem with the vestigial organ argument is that 185 list of vestigial organs, it began to dwindle very rapidly. When we started looking more closely into them, and it became 180 and then 175. And then, do you know, as we look more into the body, we realize that those vestigial organs were very useful. Many of them extremely useful. Number 2.
It is highly convenient that you did not continue on after the 175. And of course the number of vestigial organs has changed. You said it yourself. The list is from 1865, over 150 years ago. Did you seriously believe that we wouldn't have more anatomical knowledge than we did back then? The list absolutely did not go down to zero, like your graphic suggests. There are plenty of examples of vestigial organs and bodily structures. In humans, the most obvious ones are wisdom teeth, the tailbone, and certain tendons on your arm that we've known that serve little or no current function. You claim that evolution is the gaining of genetic information and cannot be the removal of other genetic information. But says who? What do you possibly have to back up the claim that evolution cannot be observed by naturally selecting organisms without some of these vestigial organs? Since you seem to care so much about observation, you can directly observe certain organisms having a higher likelihood of passing on their traits if the traits benefit their survival and allow them to have a higher chance of reproduction.
The idea of homology. We're told that similarity proves ancient ancestry. And what I simply mean by that is we're told that because humans have similar physical characteristics to certain animals, that proves that they evolved from animals. Well, similarity doesn't prove evolution at all. In fact, you could see things that are similar and you would realize that those similarities are often caused by a common designer. Suppose there were a supernatural intelligent designer and he created a world where many organisms would need to drink the same water, eat the same kinds of food, walk over the same types of terrain. What would happen? Well, obviously, he would use similarities, similar structures to accomplish his goals. Similarity doesn't prove common ancestry. In fact, similarity argues more for a common creator than anything else. Supposed evidence for evolution.
In this next portion of the video, he states that similarity is not proof of evolution at all. And what evidence does he bring to back up this claim? Absolutely nothing. And he keeps putting forth the misleading and outdated graphics depicting humans evolving from apes. Humans and apes bearing similarities does not prove evolution by the notion that humans evolved from apes, but the similarities can instead be attributed to the fact that they share a relatively recent common ancestor. It is simply stated at the end that similarities between species argues more for a common creator than it does for evolution. There was no actual content used to prop up this claim, and no matter how many times you tried to simply state that it argues for a common creator more, your reasonings did not become more valid. If you look at the similarities in a different way, they can absolutely support the theory of evolution. Looking at similar animals like rhinos and elephants raises the question of why they are similar. Is it because they are related to each other? No, they are actually not closely related at all. They instead share these similarities because the environments they adapted to through natural selection are similar, and both of their ancestors benefited from the mutations that gave them thick gray skin, tusks/horns, and powerful charging mobility. These organisms are not even remotely related, but having the same predators in the same climate allowed natural selection to produce similar animals. You can see more of these examples in the rest of the animal world. Countless creatures have evolved into crab-like or beetle-like creatures despite not having been related to them at all. Different organisms being exposed to the same environments with similar problems yield similar results.
Evolution number 3, the fossil record. You know what we're told is that you can look into the fossil record and you can find proof that organisms evolved over millions of years. Supposedly we're told that you can find transformational organisms that prove this animal evolved into some other kind of animal. But if you were to take that seriously and you were to go to the fossil record, what you would find is that those transformational fossils are missing on a grand scale. In fact, evolutionist Mark Ridley stated that no real evolutionist, whether gradualist or punctuationist, uses the fossil record as evidence in favor of the theory of evolution as opposed to special creation. Now, why would he say that? Well, he would say that because when you look at the fossil record, you see organisms coming into the fossil record fully formed. You see a stage of stasis where they do not change, and then they go out of the fossil record without evolving into anything else, exactly as the creation model would predict. The fossil record does not prove evolution. Number 4.
It makes absolutely zero sense to be dredging up all these old quotes and lists that are severely outdated. A simple Google search of the quote brings up various creationist articles written in the 1980s, stating this quote as a point of evidence. How can you possibly have any integrity when basing one of your main points off of a 40-year-old quote that was made before significant transitional fossils were found? If you examine the remainder of the quote mentioned, it makes it clear that the fossil record doesn't disprove evolution at all, but it just wasn't the strongest evidence they had. But since this quote is over 40 years old, such evidence has been found, and your claims that transitional fossils haven't been found today are completely baseless. At the end of the segment, it is again demonstrated that this guy has absolutely zero fundamental understanding of evolution. Describing things as half-formed makes absolutely zero sense, as all beings are fully formed. No matter how many times you try to say otherwise, evolution is not about getting from point A to point B, but it is instead the incremental changes that occur from mutations that either positively or negatively affect the organism over time.
The idea of mutations. We're told that mutations prove you could get a certain single-celled organism to mutate over multiplied millions of years and bring about new information on a grand scale that, given enough time, you could get a human being. What's the problem with that line of reasoning? The problem is that mutations don't give us new information. Mutations can only take information that is already available and cause it to decay. Mutations are an example of a loss of genetic information. Let me give you an
I'm going to pause right here before his example. He's provided absolutely zero evidence so far to back up any of these claims. He's attempting to claim that mutations don't give new information and implies that they must always occur when a loss of information is present. Mutations can result in a loss of genetic code, but implying that they cannot gain it is not only dishonest, but is entirely false.
An example. For the last 100 years or more now, scientists have been studying fruit flies. They are great examples of how you can mutate an organism. We have been zapping these fruit flies with radiation and mutating them in chemical ways for more than 100 years now. The reason that they are so valuable to study is because you can get a new generation every 14 days. We have in that 100-year period the equivalent of what would be millions of years of evolutionary time. And what do you have after all the radiation and mutation? Do you have a fruit fly that has evolved new genetic information? No, you don't. In fact, all you still have is a fruit fly. It hasn't evolved into anything else. Mutations don't prove evolution. That's simply not the mechanism that could get a single-celled organism to a human.
Of course, just beaming flies with radiation doesn't make them turn into another organism. Evolution utilizes natural selection, which is a subject that this channel seems to have zero grasp of.
5. English peppered moths. We're told that English peppered moths provide an example of evolution in action. You see, before the Industrial Revolution, there were two varieties of English peppered moths. One dark-colored, one light-colored, but the light-colored was much higher in ratio than the dark-colored. But after the Industrial Revolution, the dark-colored became the more prominent color and the light, the fewer in the mix. And we're told that's because birds could see the light-colored better, etc. And this was supposedly an example of natural selection. The problem with this example is, number one, many of the pictures were faked because the English peppered moths don't often land on tree trunks, and the entire idea was flawed in that way. But the second problem was that before the Industrial Revolution, the genetic information in the English peppered moth genome had genetic information for two varieties, light-colored and dark-colored, and after the genetic information was the same. English peppered moths simply do not prove evolution. And number 6.
Well, this guy certainly earned my respect. In his attempt to prove evolution and natural selection to be non-existent, he quite literally defined evolution and natural selection. The population of English peppered moths gradually changing to a genotype that produces a phenotype of a darker color because of the higher likelihood of lighter colored moths being seen and eaten by predators is the definition of evolution through natural selection.
Evolution. If you were to look in your biology textbooks, you would see that horse evolution is often used as evidence that evolution really occurred. You would see a picture of a very small animal, almost looks like a fox or something like that, evolving into modern horse. But this scenario, it's fabricated. It's not true. It was made up. In fact, more than 50 years ago, Dr. George Gaylord Simpson said the uniform continuous transformation of Hyracotherium into Equus, so dear to the hearts of generations of textbook writers, never happened in nature. You see, this information.
This quote is a complete nothing burger when it comes to proving evolution false. This quote is extremely misrepresented, and even if it wasn't, it is laughable that the only quotes and sources you could find to back up all of the claims in this video were found in the 1860s, the 1950s, and the 1980s. This quote, which is from the 1950s, is being misrepresented in the sense that it portrays the expert who said this quote as someone who does not actually believe in the evolution they are studying, which is entirely false. If you actually bother to do the slightest inkling of research before making these faceless claims, you could easily tell that the quote serves as a means of disproving misconceptions about evolution, and was not at all attempting to disprove evolution as a whole. Like I stated earlier in the video, evolution is not always some super easy chain of one organism into another one, but instead there exist complex ancestral trees that have horses and proto-horses sharing common ancestors. What we have as horses today result from one branch of their ancestral tree, and these proto-horses were earlier split-offs from the population that adapted to their environment through natural selection. Well, that'll about wrap it up for this video. Thank you all for watching.